What's up, everyone? This is Jason Tucker. This is WPwatercooler, episode number 147. Today's topic is WordPress custom fields and shortcodes. We're going to be discussing all the cool stuff you can do between them and why you should use one versus the other, and then what the heck happens with Gutenberg with all these as well. So let's go around the room real quick, get everyone introduced. George, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm George. My hair is, I work on Jetpack by day, WordPress core by night, and I get bored very easily.
Nice. Well, thank you for getting bored enough to come on the show with us. We really appreciate it. Robert, how about you, my friend?
You're muted.
No,
muted, Robert. All right, we'll come back to you in just a minute. Russ, how about you?
So I'm Russ. I'm in Las Vegas with Robert. Robert works at a thing called Shiny 9 Design. Does his own thing. He runs WordCamp Vegas 2017. I'm Russ. I do WordPress stuff at Web Dev Studios.
Wait, so with Robert muted, would that make him Silent Bob?
That would totally make him Silent Bob. I would totally be Jason Mewes. I would totally be Jay, 100%.
I'll be the buddy Jesus.
Nice. How about you, Sarah? Tell us a little about yourself.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I do things at Zeek Interactive. I also do things at the Orange County WordPress Design Meetup, first Monday of the month.
You're totally not reading that, Sarah, are you?
Huh? I was trying to look at the camera.
Oh, okay.
I was trying to connect with the audience.
How about you, Steve?
All right, I'm going to connect with the audience. I am Steve Zenkett. I am the founder at Zeek Interactive, and I run the OC WordPress Meetup.
Awesome. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me over at Jason Tucker on Twitter. My website is jasontucker.blog. Feel free to go take a look at that. And we do a bunch of stuff over on WPwatercooler. Go take a look at all the things that we got going on over there at WPwatercooler.com. What do you have to say, Steve?
Just a quick shout out. I'm going to mention it again. I mentioned it last week. We still have sponsorship opportunities for WordCamp US, which is coming up on December 1st and 2nd. So if you work at a company that's interested in that, hit me up.
You guys are also doing
that's what all the kids say these days, right? Hey, HMU.
No. I think they say light me up or lit me up. One of the two. I don't know.
Lit AF.
Yeah.
Steve, you guys are also doing Google Hangouts or something as well regarding some stuff, right?
We do. We have a new Google Hangout, new podcast called Go WCUS, which will be right after this one. So
wow, check that out.
Yeah, it'll be at noon Pacific today.
Block scheduling.
Cool. Nice. All right, so let's talk a little bit about custom fields and shortcodes and how people are using them, both in themes as well as just using them, in their blog posts. So the way I look at when we're looking at using custom fields and meta boxes is that typically when you start collecting data on a particular post and you wanting to use that someplace else on that site or that particular post, you would kind of fill that information in inside of a meta box and then use it in the theme, where shortcodes is more like I want to use this kind of ad hoc someplace in the post, right?
Well, I mean, there's other things too, which is really cool in that shortcodes can give you a lot more flexibility with just using it right in the editor instead of having to go somewhere else to inject stuff, and that's good for like in your content. But the problem is, unless they're doing something funky on the processing side, it's not indexable or searchable. So if you're trying to like put a block into all your posts that is a shortcode, you can't really search by that apart from just searching the content of the post. You can't just like find me all posts with 5-star ratings if that's just in the content. You need meta for that, or categories.
Right. I mean, that's kind of what I was kind of thinking about here when we were kind of coming up with a topic for this week is when you have a custom field that you're going to be collecting the information through using a meta box and kind of being able to display that and make it easy for somebody to be able to fill that information in. Trying to remember these shortcodes and all the different shortcodes that are out there that are installed into the theme or installed via plugins just seems like a massive pain in the butt, where having those custom fields there.
So one thing though that I like to use is like a meta box is specific to like this kind of post type, or you can say it's specific to these post types, but a shortcode you can use anywhere, right? Like a shortcode can just go anywhere it wants, where a meta box, you have to tell it to go where you want it to do, or you have to kind of do that. That's how I separate those two, right? A shortcode you can just use almost anywhere.
And I was going to say something similar to what Russ said, right? So shortcode you can put anywhere you want within the body of the content, right? So if a shortcode is going to turn into something, say a video, I know that's a bad example because there's a lot of O embeds for that, but if you wanted to place something into the body of the content, that's the flexibility a shortcode allows you to do. A meta box really is dictated by the theme as to where that ends up within the body of your content. We play with that a lot when we're building sites for our clients.
So fun fact, most of my website is nothing but most of my personal website is shortcodes. Like I have a list of band names that I think are funny, and that's just a shortcode that says band names, and then that piece of code just runs a query and gets all the band names in the post type called band names and displays them. That's all I'm doing.
But your entire website's built off of shortcodes if you're using Visual Composer, though, right?
I'm not using Visual Composer at all. How dare you? How dare you?
Nice. And you know, but that's a good point, Jason, because shortcodes can get messy, right? And shortcodes, for my clients at least, can look very codey, right, for lack of a better term. So if you don't know what you're doing, it's easy to mess up a shortcode, right? So if you leave off the end of a shortcode, or you do some parameter wrong, or you type it in incorrectly, your shortcode may just render as that shortcode on the front of the page, right? So I think there's a lot more margin for error when you're using a shortcode for somebody who's non-technical.
Well,
and just remember them all.
It gets even worse when like the shortcode for a button is longer than you would actually write like the A tag and the href, and like to do all of that, like that's where it starts getting like messy, because then like you have the shortcode and it goes 3 lines inside of the editor, and you're not sure where it starts, where it stops. That's where a meta box would probably be a better answer down the road, you know.
Another option to consider is, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it depends on what you're doing, but go ahead, George.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. It totally depends on what you're doing. For example, if you're doing some shortcode blocks in the existing editor, you can do shortcode views, so folks can have like visual representations of it and then not have to worry about the code. It can give them a form and they can check what options they want, and they can just build the actual shortcode for them.
So
a bit more complicated to put together from the developer side, but
no. But some of the better plugins, there are some plugins I've seen that we use, right, that'll let you add boxes or buttons to the TinyMCE editor, right? So you click it, you fill in your metadata, whatever it is, and it inserts that shortcode for you in the body of the post.
Gravity Forms is a great one to do that, and I think the most recognized kind of shortcode would be the ones that come in WooCommerce. They give you like that Woo login, and then it says like shopping cart, and then it says like store, stuff like that. Those are just shortcodes that, again, it's just a bracket. It says the word store and then a closing bracket, but behind the scenes, it's doing a lot of different stuff to display that. And I think I would rather have a shortcode for that instead of trying to configure like 900 meta boxes for my WooCommerce store. I think that's a good example.
There's one issue with the things like the Gravity Form shortcode, though, is once you've inserted it into the body post, you can't go back in and edit it, right? It basically is creating the shortcode for you and it's sticking it there, right? It's not like you can re-click it and open it up and edit what's in the shortcode. It's just really creating what's in the shortcode for you.
That's a good point. So when you use the TinyMCE editor,
occasionally I have one.
Okay, you're right and you're wrong. So number one, you use the TinyMCE editor, you pick what you want, and it creates that shortcode. You can actually like change false to true. You can actually like type those things. But if you want to go and select something again, you would have to rebuild that shortcode and then get those other options. So you can change it, or you're right, you have to delete it and start over again.
Yep. Well, not necessarily, because when making the shortcode views, you can add edit functions. That's how like inline images in Core works. You can click the edit thing, then a pop-up modal comes, and you can change the options and save it.
Ooh.
That's what Jetpack's been doing with contact forms lately.
Totally get it. Totally get it. Yeah, totally get it. I'm just saying not all plugins are created equally. So there are some plugins that just insert the shortcode and then That's it. If you want to edit it, you've actually got to go into the shortcode and make your edits.
Could we just make tiny MCE just be an IDE for being able to write, syntax in there? So it has like a little bit of like that Visual Studio type of composing the text that you're going to put in there. So you put in a bracket, you typing in a short code, and it goes, oh, here's a list of short codes. Let me find a short code for
That's easy for you to say.
All right.
So funny thing about that, as there's been a lot of effort lately in getting Code Mirror into core for the next release, which will let you do like syntax highlighting for the CSS editor and the customizer. And also add syntax highlighting for the plugin and theme editor while it's at it. There's also been some interest to see what we can do by way of like the HTML editor as opposed to the visual editor. If like when someone's modifying that, if we can add some syntax highlighting there to like pop out an image tag to make it a bit easier to see what you're doing.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, George, but TinyMCE isn't something that WordPress creates. That's a third-party system that's integrated into WordPress.
That's an upstream project, just like Code Mirror, just like jQuery.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Dude, I mean, Code Mirror has Sublime Text key bindings in it. I mean, you could do some pretty cool stuff, it looks like, with using Code Mirror.
So
sweet, we are going to get an IDE in this thing. That's awesome.
I've started experimenting with shortcodes a while back.
I was thinking the same thing.
It was a Friday night.
All my friends were doing it, felt peer pressure.
So I started building my own shortcodes, and like what I like about shortcodes are that the options are endless, right? Like with something with advanced custom fields, you have to buy the pro version if you want to do a repeatable box or whatever. But with shortcodes, you can program them to do whatever you want, right? So, I mean, maybe that's where shortcodes have a slight advantage over meta boxes and some kind of options. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm on the fence about that one because for all of our meta boxes we use ACF, right? So our meta boxes are pretty slick. But we use that because they're all client facing. We want to make them as foolproof and as kind of as user friendly as possible. So our meta boxes have a lot of UI to them. I know it's a kind of a tangent, but
yeah. Well, all I was saying is that okay, here's a shortcode, and that you can put whatever in the shortcode and then it does it. Or hey, you want repeatable fields? You have to pay $99 per year to have this plugin to do that. I think that's kind of that difference, right? Whereas
with shortcodes, you can just copy paste it 5 times in the same post.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Well, if price is an issue, CMB2 does repeaters as well, and CMB2 is totally free, and it's much
it
more
does.
And I definitely don't know the company that builds that.
Yeah, I wonder who did CMB2, and we've used that as well. We use CMB2, and I like it. And you're right. Look, but if price is an issue and you can't afford $100 for a plugin, right? How much you got to think about how much your time is worth, right? I have nothing against CMB2. I like it, but we like the slickness of advanced custom fields a little bit better. It's just what we
use ACF on tons of stuff. But all I was saying is that like. For the most part, if you have a client who maybe is the edit page illiterate, maybe it's easier to give them a shortcode instead of saying, here, configure all these options in a meta box. And maybe that's an advantage that a shortcode would have over an ACF or something like that.
Totally. Now, there is a problem with a shortcode is, let's say you have a bunch of shortcodes in your content, and you disable the plugin that enabled the shortcode. Right, you now have all those shortcodes are just going to show as text in your content. Right?
What do we call those? Are those naked shortcodes?
We call that Visual Composer. Did you say naked shortcodes?
Naked
like a hanging Chad, or
it sounds like a hanging Chad. That's what it is.
Then you got meta stuff and like shortcodes inside shortcodes.
I heard you like shortcodes. So you can shortcode while you shortcode.
Yeah, it is called naked shortcodes. They're naked shortcodes when that happens.
They're naked shortcodes. Wow, I like that.
I feel like that's going to be an episode of Seinfeld when they come back.
Cleaning out your naked shortcodes. Look at that.
So that is that kind of problem with shortcodes, though, right? Like you're using this little piece of code to make your buttons, and you have that across, let's say, 100 pages, and now you want to use this other shortcode because like this button looks a little bit better. You have to go and update that, whether you do a search and replace in the database or you physically log into every page and go and look for it. There is that problem where you would take something like an ACF and you would just change kind of the output of whatever that button is, or you do a little CSS and it would be updated across the board. So there is that issue.
So in terms of hunting down naked shortcodes, there's a great plugin called Shortcodes in Use that will tell you what shortcodes are registered, what pages they appear on, so that when you do disable that plugin that's got whatever, you can track down all the calls to it and blitz them.
Will it go through your content and hunt shortcodes that are not in use?
I was gonna say, I think WP Engine just blacklisted that plugin.
Okay, so
we like seriously, or just because we mentioned it?
I think because it does like a huge, it touches the database and it does a huge search. I think they would deactivate that.
That would be a big full text search.
Yeah.
Did our friend Matt Cromwell coin the phrase naked shortcodes, or did he just write about?
I just found the post. Yeah.
Because I'm just gonna assume he did now because he's so cool. So
yeah.
So cool. Yeah. We got about halfway through the show. I'm thinking that we could talk a little bit about how Gutenberg would kind of tie into this a little bit. I mean, we can definitely kind of discuss a little bit of that, because I think that we're during the pre-show we were talking about how these various blocks that are being built using Gutenberg could, replace a whole bunch of these sorts of things. And so
it's almost like the topic for the show had a plan for the future. It's really weird how that works. It's really
weird. I know.
I mean, I'm sure it was purely coincidental.
Yeah.
But how would that affect that? I mean, how would it, how would having these custom fields or these meta boxes that are storing them kind of, make it so that somebody who's editing the post would be able to see this and be able to interact with it, or putting in shortcodes in there. So now you have shortcodes, meta boxes, and you're going to have some Gutenberg goodness going all at the same time.
Well, actually, Gutenberg. Go ahead.
Go for it, Sarah.
The last I read of the track ticket, the meta boxes that already exist in various parts of the WordPress dashboard have been identified as a potential problem. Like, hey, this is a thing that people use, and we're not sure that this is going to be backwards compatible yet. We should probably figure this out. But I think it's just in the identifying the problem phase at this point.
Yeah, I mean, legacy meta boxes are going to be there in the final version of Gutenberg. They've just been working on other areas, and there's only so many people to go around. The biggest thing I see is that Gutenberg blocks are more analogous to shortcodes than custom meta on a post, because I mean, it's just formatted content that is stored in the and then rendered on output. That's what blocks are. That's what shortcodes are. It's all just writing off the WP post table instead of making 20 extra new rows in the post meta table.
Yeah, it's more about where it's stored than anything else.
I mean, I think at this point the most I'd be worried about is that you have a meta box that says get all the posts in this post type, and then you have a shortcode that runs that same query, and then you put a Gutenberg box that does the same kind of thing. Now you have 3 of the same content on the same page. I think that's where, probably step 1 of identifying, how many things on a page do we have versus do we need. I think that's kind of my biggest concern at the point. I'm not worried about meta boxes and all this other data. I'm just worried about my client having 3 of the same shortcode doing the same exact thing, and now I'm running 3 queries on the same page, which still happens today without Gutenberg. So it's not a Gutenberg thing.
Yeah, I mean, plus you can still do we didn't even mention this, but do shortcode inside of a theme. So now you're hiding the fact that you're using a shortcode someplace. So I don't know, it just seems like there's a bunch of different ways that you can kind of use these various features.
Well, I'm sure shortcodes are going to stick around because it just parses whatever and outputs HTML. So that shouldn't be related to Gutenberg at all. You know.
One of the questions that I have that's still very much up in the air is what happens to everyone that built in shortcode views for the existing version of TinyMCE editor. If that's no longer going to be there, will they like render as a view inside of a like text block, which would be kind of odd because it would just be a block into block kind of. It'd be interesting to see how it plays out.
You know,
again, this is a problem. It's just needs to be answered.
It's going to be two views in the editor. So when you go to edit a post, it's going to say classic WordPress or Gutenberg, and then you can switch. like that's what I see happening.
Oh, it's like a Rosetta. It's like a Rosetta for WordPress.
No, it's totally like we're updating the UI, and it's like, do you want to use the old Gmail or the new Gmail? You try it out. Like, let us know. Like, I kind of feel like we're going in that direction.
Decisions over options. Come on, man.
Nice.
The one thing that I loved about shortcodes when they were first introduced was that you didn't have to use a plugin like allow PHP in the content area. You know, that's what shortcodes are for, right? Is getting around around that kind of plugin.
What's the matter with embedding PHP in the middle of your content? I mean, what could possibly go wrong there?
We all did it at one point.
There was an entire social network that did that. I mean, come on.
So I'm not arguing that, MySpace. All I'm saying is that like nothing was worse when you logged into a page and you're like, oh, I'm going to go edit this little paragraph, and it's nothing but PHP include and all this other stuff. Like, okay, here's a shortcode, and the shortcode is so much easier. The part about shortcodes that pissed me off, if I can say, is when you have the start and the stop. So it's like you have a shortcode to open a div and then a shortcode to close a div, and then you put your stuff between it. Those always used to make me mad, because like if you want,
what's wrong with those?
Because if you wanted to do
Yeah,
they
what's
used to
wrong
make
with
me
those?
mad. Because if I wanted two columns side by side, you had to do like a shortcode called row, and then a shortcode called div half, and then then your other thing, and then close it and open it, then open another row. Shortcodes started getting horrible when you had to start like using a shortcode to use another shortcode.
Yeah, those sound like long or medium codes at that point.
No,
I
think that's why Visual Composer got built, right? Visual Composer was like, we'll insert rows. We're okay with that.
So your problem is nested shortcodes more so than an opening and closing shortcode.
My problem is that if I wanted to use a shortcode, I had to use 4 other shortcodes to make this one like actual show up on the page, or else it didn't display the way I wanted to. That was my issue.
And this made you angry.
It made me very angry.
Go back to this. Okay.
Have you gotten over it yet, or
this is like the 8th phone that I've had because I used to smash so many phones.
Oh, it's a WordPress shortcode therapy session.
yeah?
I used to talk to a therapist about it made me feel.
Where did the shortcode touch you?
Show me on the doll.
Where the shortcode touched you.
Oh, we digress as usual.
We're sitting about shortcodes.
we have 7 more minutes. What else are we gonna do here?
Yeah,
the whole thing's been a digression.
No, I'm with you, Rust, in that the shortcode thing, it's almost like at some point you're writing PHP. It's like you're gonna have an if shortcode, and then you're gonna have an else shortcode, and then you're gonna have a closing if shortcode, and it's just like, come on, this is getting out of hand.
So while we're talking about shortcodes and stuff, one of the things that makes me angry about shortcodes is using them to run queries. And Russ, you mentioned earlier that you've got a shortcode that outputs all the band names.
Uh-huh.
When you do that, you end up running a WP query twice, once for the page itself as it renders, and then once throughout the code of your shortcode. Uh-huh. Why not just use the WP hierarchy? Why not just create archive-bandname.php and take advantage?
Because I actually didn't want to have an archive page where you can go and see. I didn't want duplicate things, because all I'm doing is with my post type, it just says band names, and I'm just using the title. So the archive would just show the title as well. Then I would have 2 pages. I would have the actual page where I'm outputting and the archive. They would be identical in the sense of like all it says is just the name of the band that would be.
All I'm saying, though, I see it a lot, and it's database.
And I'm also too lazy to actually build a template for it to do that, because I change themes all the time. So it was easier for a shortcode instead of every time I change a theme, I don't want to include this other page or whatever.
Portability, I'm down with it.
I mean, that's what makes me a competent developer.
Okay, if it's just the one thing.
with short.
So if you do that, my point is use transients. If you have to do a query within a shortcode, use some transients, check them,
Absolutely.
and if they don't create, then run the query.
I wasn't going to get into caching and transients, but that's exactly what's happening on the back end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I got into it for you.
Sure. I mean,
Because I too am competent.
So I think with the three of these different ways of being able to display this content and be able to do, like you're saying, queries and that sort of thing, is that a lot of this stuff is either put into a plugin or it's plugged into a theme. And if we end up where the theme has, if the theme ends up having all those shortcodes defined in there, then when you switch themes, just like what Russ is saying, you'll end up losing, those shortcodes, just like with custom fields or any of those other sorts of things.
And that's
right?
that's always been something that I've been concerned with since using WordPress, is that I'm going to change themes. I like to change the look of different stuff, and I like different colors and whatever. I want to be able to do that easily on the fly. And if I change a theme and I have, like 20 custom post types and I have to go build 20 templates because I want to do, something with an archive or whatever, I don't want to have to do that anymore. And yes, we do have the one template where you can specify this is the archive for these post types. You can use that kind of hierarchy. Even then, I think a shortcode beats that instead of, sitting down on a Saturday and building out this page template. If you're going to...
Why does it have to be on a Saturday? You can't code on Sunday? Or?
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard.
I know them all on Shoulder Shabbos.
I had a joke and I wasn't going to say it. Anyway, so I think a shortcode beats that in every aspect of that. And instead of doing all this stuff with the theme and remembering that this is in the theme versus this is in the plugin versus this is part of core, everything is in one plugin that I have. And whether I switch themes or if I change whatever, I know that plugin's still active and I'm good to go.
Fair enough.
Anybody else got anything?
For the next 3 minutes. Yeah. What do we do for the rest of the time?
I mean, so I can tell you guys about my old fashioned that I had last night about how the bartender made me upset. I can show you guys where on the doll where that was.
Do we need to get you some therapy, Russ? Do we need a Kickstarter to mellow you the F out? Is that
so when shortcodes were introduced, I had a big problem with shortcodes, and if you remember from our meetup here in Vegas and even WordCamps, I used to pick on shortcodes all the time. I really did. Now that we have Visual Composer, I pick on them even more because shortcodes get out of control.
Wow.
There's nothing like doing support and saying like, yeah, sure, I can go fix that for you, and then 2 hours later you're installing your third plugin to try to do this, or you're trying to hook into a shortcode to output a P tag instead of an A tag. Like that's where stuff starts getting unreal.
So a note for the developers: be responsible and use that third arg for creating a shortcode and give us some filters to work with.
Sounds about right.
Okay.
That's it, folks. That's it for today. Thank you very much for being on the show and hanging out with us. We had a good collection of people watching us today, so that was awesome. So thank you very much for watching the show, hanging out with us and stuff. If you like this particular content, go over to WPwatercooler.com/subscribe. That's where you can find out where you can subscribe to all the shows that happen on WP Watercooler. We really appreciate it.
What if you don't like this content?
And if you're sticking around and you want to see what's going on, go watch the next show that Steve's going to be on in about 5 minutes here. So I don't want Steve to be late or anything.
I can't promise you any better quality around that show. Right? I'm really just phoning it in at this point.
Nice. All right, guys. We'll talk to y'all later. You have a good one. Bye-bye.